With 2023 now in the rearview mirror, we have officially reached the end of the first year of joint LMH and LMDh competition in the FIA World Endurance Championship and the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship. Now, this begs an important question. Which of the 9 cars that competed in the converged class in 2023 was best? Now, you may say, surely you can't make that comparison. Some manufacturers competed in both IMSA and the WEC, and some only competed in one of the two. Some manufacturers competed with only a single car in one championship, while others ran multiple cars across the world. Let's not forget BOP, the nature of the teams running the cars, and of course the drivers behind the wheel. Surely, with all of these different factors in mind, there is no 100% viable way of deducing a clear ranking, especially when considering that some of these cars never even competed against each other. The only way to do that would be to get all of the cars de-restricted, put on the same track, and have the same driver lap them, which is obviously very unlikely to ever happen. The closest we actually got to that was Super Sebring, but we'll get to that later. Ultimately, in terms of race performance, it's very difficult to compare all of the converged prototypes. But that hasn't stopped me from trying. I've created a ranking system in order to do what some might describe as comparing apples to oranges. For each race a manufacturer participates in, you take the best placed car of that manufacturer and compare it to the best placed car from each other manufacturer. You then order the manufacturers based on the finishing position of the best placed car. You repeat this process for each race a manufacturer participates in, regardless of the series and regardless of whether the best placed car is the factory team or not, and calculate an average placing among the manufacturers. The lower the number, the better. The system isn't perfect, of course, as, due to the higher manufacturer count in the WEC, poor performances in the World Championship seriously hurts the average score of a manufacturer, benefiting those that compete solely in IMSA. The system also doesn't take into account the length of the races, the championship-dependent spec of the cars, for example different BOP settings, or negate the impacts of driver performance, reliability, crashes, or even just bad luck. The system was also created by someone who isn't particularly mathematically talented either. With all that in mind, take it with a grain of salt. What this system does allow us to do is gain a rough idea of the relative performance of each car, regardless of the number of races or championships it is used in, as well as the number of cars entered from any given manufacturer. Anyway, enough explaining. It's time to rank these cars from worst to best. So we start with number 9 out of 9, and unfortunately, coming as a surprise to probably no one, the worst performing car of 2023 was the Vanwall Vandervelde 680. This car is the replacement for the Bicolor's CLM P101 LMP1 car. The 680 was supposed to debut in 2021, but a slew of issues delayed said debut back to 2023's Sebring 1000 miles. Unfortunately, the car's competitive run has been plagued by many of the same issues as its predecessor. The car's best finish in 2023 came in its debut race, finishing 8th in class. However, accidents, poor reliability, and poor car performance meant that Sebring would be its peak. The car retired from 3 of its 7 races, and finished fairly poorly in its other outings. The Vanwall finished the year with an average manufacturer ranking of 6.429, a painful result. Unfortunately, I'd written over half of this video when it was announced that for 2024, Vanwall had been rejected from the WEC's entry list. The exact specifics on why they were rejected hadn't been announced at the time of writing, but I suspect the car's poor performance was likely a factor. Despite this, I believe the efforts of privateer teams essentially building their own car from the ground up and keeping the privateer spirit alive is something that should at least be commended, which leads us to number 8. The Glicken House SC7 LMH entered its 3rd year of WEC competition. Glicken House's existence in the WEC's Hypercar class has been an uphill battle, facing manufacturer giants like Toyota as well as Alpine's grandfathered LMP1 car, a battle which has made the plucky American team a fan favourite. The height of the program came in 2022 with a 3rd place at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Unfortunately, however, we're not here to talk about 2022. The increased manufacturer presence has pushed Glicken House to the back of the field. Woes for some of the big manufacturers perhaps in no small part helped elevate the team to a best place finish of 6th at Le Mans in 2023. Unfortunately, one decent result amid races where the team barely scraped into the top 10 and the need to invest millions to stay competitive among the giants of endurance racing doesn't seem to be an appealing enough prospect to continue, and Glicken House have pulled the plug on the program. Glicken House were one of the first manufacturers to commit to the hypercar class, and losing this incredible underdog effort is a massive shame. However, this team should be commended for taking on the big guns. They ended the year with a manufacturer ranking average of 5.400. Coming in at number 7, we have the wingless Peugeot 9X8, which entered its second year of WEC competition. I'm no engineering expert, but I feel like it makes sense that a car this radically different from its opposition wouldn't have a straightforward development, and unfortunately, that is exactly the case with the 9X8. The car struggled with reliability issues in 2023, notably related to the gearbox, and given that the car has no rear wing, it also struggled with traction issues at times. The season wasn't without its highlights for Peugeot. The car was competitive at Le Mans, with the 94 car leading the race for a period of time, and the 93 car picked up the first podium of the program at Monza. Its other results have seen the best placed Peugeot generally placed in the lower half of the top 10. The 9X8 does have a long way to go, but they are making moves to cover this ground, with major overhauls planned for the car set to arrive at some point in 2024, which may or may not include a rear wing. Overall, Peugeot aren't quite there yet, but they're getting better. Watch this space. They get a score of 4.714. Moving on to number 6, and we have the Cadillac V Series R, which entered its very first season of both IMSA and WEC competition. In IMSA, much like its predecessor, the DPI VR, the V Series R was a strong performer, particularly in the hands of the number 31 Whelen Engineering Racing team, who won both the main championship and the Michelin Endurance Cup. The first win for the Cadillac came at Sebring, which we'll get to, and while it arguably landed in their lap, I'm a big believer in the legitimacy of the Stephen Bradbury, so it was more than deserved in my books. Another win at Laguna Seca, this time from Chip Ganassi Racing, as well as a number of podiums from both squads, as well as very few poor performances, meant that Cadillac also walked away with the Manufacturers' Championship. If we were basing this list solely off the car's IMSA performances, the Cadillac would have easily been in the top 3. However, the Ganassi run number 2 effort in the WEC had a slightly harder time of it. In the early part of the 2023 season, the Cadillac team picked up some solid results by simply keeping out of trouble. The number 2 team scored their best finish of the season when Richard Westbrook, Alex Lynn and Earl Bamber brought home a 3rd place at Le Mans. Their WEC performance peaked there before promptly falling off a cliff. Pit strategy dramas resulting from poorly timed safety cars at Monza, a messy breakup with a wheel at Fuji, and a penalty from contact at the race start in Bahrain meant that from the last 3 races of the season, Cadillac finished 10th, and 11th, a huge drop from its strong run in the first half of the season. Remember how I said that poor performances in the WEC seriously hurt some of the manufacturer rankings? Well, I think it's safe to say that nobody suffered more from this than Cadillac, walking away from season 2023 with a score of 3.31. Had it just been the IMSA results, it would have been 2.333, which would have seen it rank 3rd on the overall list. However, it's promising for Cadillac that a lot of their poor WEC results were down to bad luck, and its IMSA performances have shown that this car has plenty of potential. Now for 5th on our list, we have a manufacturer that's probably walking away from 2023 a little bit disappointed with their year. That manufacturer is Porsche and their 963. Buckle up, as I have a lot to say about this. The hype around Porsche's return to top-flight prototypes since the departure of the 919 Hybrid was immense. Porsche and Team Penske got the band back together for their first reunion tour since 2009, and a host of privateer 963 efforts sought to bring the new era of Porsche prototype racing back to the glory days of the Group C 956 and 962. The program got off to a rough start. A myriad of issues saw the best placed number 7 car finish the Rolex 24 at Daytona in 7th place in class, and 34 laps off the lead. The Sebring 1000 miles saw the best placed Porsche finish 5th, a solid effort. However, the 12 hours of Sebring that same weekend was a different story. While Porsche had a classified best finish of 3rd, Porsche were running 1st and 3rd in class in the closing stages before both cars, along with the number 10 Acura, which ran 2nd at the time, were wiped out in a multi-car collision caused by contact between the number 6 and the number 10. While I potential first win for the 963 was thrown away at Sebring, victory would eventually arrive at Long Beach, and that same weekend, Porsche picked up a podium in the WEC at Portimao, followed by decent results at Spa and Laguna Seca. Then, we arrive at Le Mans. The Porsche prototype contingent consisted of the 2 Penske cars that had run the full season, as well as an additional car from the United States, and the Jota run car that had debuted the previous round at Spa. Despite various 963s leading the race at several points, mechanical issues and on-track incidents severely hampered Porsche's efforts. While Le Mans enjoyed its 100th birthday, Porsche was driving the porcelain bus at its 75th. Unfortunately, the Le Mans hangover was no more pleasant. At the Salem 6 Hours of the Glen, the number 6 Porsche crossed the line first on the road, but was disqualified because the skid block on the car was too thin. Thankfully, things began to look a little better from here. The 963 took victory in the IMSA rounds at Road America and Indianapolis and picked up a podium at Fuji Speedway after the number 6 car fought for the lead. The IMSA number 6 car was actually in contention for the championship going into Petit Le Mans, but a multi-car collision close to the start of the race, as well as sustaining additional crash damage, meant that those chances fell by the wayside. As you can tell, Porsche, particularly the Penske run cars, had a very mixed bag of a year across both championships. Now, the 963 didn't perform badly for a first season. In fact, its results in the WEC weren't far off the 919 in its first year. But I think these results were short of Porsche's very high expectations, especially at Le Mans. There were plenty of missed opportunities too. Sebring and Road Atlanta immediately spring to mind. However, I think what is extremely promising are the performances put in by the customer Porsche teams. In IMSA, on a number of occasions, the JDC Porsche beat the factory cars, and Proton managed to pick up a podium at Petit Le Mans when the factory cars didn't. Over in the WEC, Jota managed to finish 4th at Bahrain, ahead of both of the factory cars, and managed to challenge the factory Ferraris in the process. In fact, the strong performances of the customer cars probably helped in no small part in keeping Porsche ahead of Cadillac in the rankings. Also, much like when Penske ran the Acura back in the DPI days, it took a season before they started reaching their full potential with a new prototype. The first season of racing for the 963 was a very mixed bag, that's for sure. But don't doubt the most successful make in endurance racing for a second. We will look back on this time in sports cars years from now, and I wholeheartedly believe that the 963 will be remembered as one of the cars of the era. Porsche end 2023 with a score of 3.008.
And in 4th on this list, we have the BMW M Hybrid V8, which entered its very first season of IMSA competition, run by Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing.
Now, I'll be honest with you, its 4th place may highlight a fault in the system, as this car was outperformed by both Porsche and Cadillac in the IMSA Manufacturers Championship. Had it just been the IMSA results that determined the rankings, the BMW would have placed behind both of them. It was only the particularly bad weekends experienced by both Porsche and Cadillac in the WEC that meant this car placed as high as it did. Still, the BMW was by no means a bad car. In IMSA, it was a quiet performer, picking up strong finishes when its competitors fell short. For instance, at the 12 Hours of Sebring, the number 25 car finished second in the hands of Connor Di Filippi, Nick Yellerly and Sheldon van der Linde after the 2 Penske Porsches and the Wayne Taylor Acura took each other out. Later in the season, the car won its first race at the 6 Hours of the Glen, after the leading Porsche was disqualified. The car picked up several other podiums in 2023 as well. Despite having mechanical problems at Daytona and a torrid weekend at Road America, the number 25 BMW crew still had an outside chance to win the IMSA Championship, but in the end fell short. Was this car a standout performer? Not really. Do I think it will rank this highly in 2024 when WRT field the car in the WEC? Well, you never know, but honestly, no. But I've been wrong before, and I would certainly like to be proven wrong on this occasion. The car finished the year with a score of 2.666.
Now we enter the top 3, and coming in at position number 3, we have the Acura RX06. Now, before anybody starts bashing their keyboards, whichever way you look at it, Acura won the Rolex 24 at Daytona.
Regardless of what you believe should or shouldn't have happened to the Meyer Shank team, Wayne Taylor Racing were second with their Acura, so even if they had been disqualified, Acura still wins.
Like the rest of the LMDh cars, the ARX06 entered its first season of IMSA competition, replacing the ARX05 DPI car, which, along with the Cadillac, dominated the DPI era. Aside from the win at Daytona to start the year, the first half of the IMSA season yielded unimpressive results. However, the second half saw both Meyershank Racing and Wayne Taylor Racing back on form, scoring multiple podiums and victories. Had Meyershank never been disqualified from the Daytona 24 Hours, the number 60 car winning Petit Le Mans would have secured them the championship, the thought of which is bittersweet for the team, I'd imagine. Petit Le Mans was also Meyershank's last race in IMSA for now at least, with the team stepping away to focus on IndyCar. Race by race in IMSA, Acura was beaten by Porsche and Cadillac. In fact, had we just been doing this on IMSA results, Acura would have placed third out of the 4 LMDh cars. However, Wayne Taylor Racing and Meyershank as teams were able to put better seasons together than the Penske Porsches and were only beaten by one of the Cadillacs, hence their strong performance in the team's championship. Furthermore, with some of Porsche and Cadillac's poor results in the WEC, Acura was able to place ahead of both of them in the rankings. It'll be interesting to see how the car performs in the WEC, which I think will eventually happen, but for now, Acura finished a strong first year with a score of 2.555.
Coming in at number 2, we have arguably the most impressive of the new for 2023 Hypercar / GTP cars, and what some would probably go as far to say was the most impressive car of the year.
That car was the Ferrari 499P. Its debut season in the WEC marked Ferrari's return to top flight prototypes since the 333 SP that raced between 1994 and 2003, and marked Ferrari's return to the top class of Le Mans for the first time since 1973. Ferrari were also chasing their first overall Le Mans win since 1965. In the hands of AF Corsa, the Ferrari proved itself as one of the fastest cars on the grid on one lap pace, picking up its first pole position at Sebring. The race ultimately ended with a Toyota 1-2, but the 499P still picked up its first podium, which was then followed by additional podiums at Portimao and Spa. By this point, the 499P had established itself as easily the second best of the LMH cars, and arguably the second best car in the entire converged rule set. But that didn't quite change the fact that Toyota had gone 3 for 3 from the opening 3 races. Ferrari, and indeed the rest of the cars in the top class, had an enormous task going into 2023. Going into Le Mans, Toyota had won 13 out of the 15 races since the hypercar class began, and had won every single Le Mans since 2018. However, at Le Mans 2023, Ferrari finally toppled Toyota, with the number 51 Ferrari of James Calado, Antonio Giovinazzi, and Alessandro Pierguidi crossing the line first after 24 hours, breaking a 58-year-long drought for overall wins for Ferrari at Le Mans, and becoming the first manufacturer other than Toyota to win the race since 2017. A hugely impressive result in the first year for the new car. Unfortunately, AF Corsa's efforts were unable to yield a championship. A lack of consistency for both the 50 and 51 was what cost them a decent run at the title. While Ferrari may have lost the war, they won the most important battle of them all. The first year was hugely promising for the 499P, and while it didn't take the top spot by the numbers, I think people would rank this as the sports car of the year. It finishes with a score of 2.000.
And coming in at number 1 with a hugely impressive score of 1.143, it's the Toyota GR010, which entered its third year of WEC competition in 2023.
Now, this shouldn't really be a shock to anyone. While the new batch of teams and cars were all very impressive, with an effective 2-year head start on most of the Hypercar and GTP programs, a fast and vastly bulletproof race car, and an overall exceptional team running the show, Toyota showed once again that they really are the top dogs at the minute. The GR010 won 6 out of the 7 races it participated in 2023. Losing Le Mans, especially in the first year of proper presence in the new top class, will undoubtedly irk Toyota. Some might say that it discredits their wins in the dying days of the LMP1 era and the early days of the hypercars due to their lack of competition, but that simply isn't true. The numbers show that Toyota still annihilated the competition. The championship winning number 8 crew of Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley and Ryo Hirakawa only finished outside of the top 2 on a single occasion, and they still finished second at Le Mans. Regardless of what anyone thinks, race by race, the GR010 is the best car on the hypercar grid, and I think it'll be a long time, if ever, before anyone dominates the WEC like Toyota have again. 2023 proved that the rest of the competition still has a lot of catching up to do, as Ferrari were the only ones that really came close to challenging the Toyota Gazoo racing powerhouse. And that is why the Toyota GR010 sits atop the rankings for 2023. So there you have it. There are the final rankings for the first season of converged prototype racing. Obviously, the system has a few limitations, and it would be essentially impossible to accurately rank every single car unless they were driven on the same track by the same driver. As mentioned earlier in the video, Sebring was the only time every competing car shared the same track on the same weekend. By taking the qualifying results of each car for both the IMSA and the WEC races, we end up with a list that looks not too dissimilar from the ranking system. I feel like the jury's kind of out on the true rankings of the LMDh cars, given that the results of the Cadillac and the Porsche were so heavily influenced by their results in the WEC, and the Acura and the BMW didn't participate. I also think they were all so close in IMSA that you may as well rank them together. Ultimately, while flawed, I think the system has been quite successful in providing a fairly accurate ranking, a ranking which the very deserving GR010 has found itself on top of.
I'm expecting this ranking to look very different at the end of 2024, and I'm especially interested to see where the new cars that are joining the grid this year factor into everything. What do you think of these rankings, and how would you rank the performance of each car in 2023? Comment below. I do actually read the comments, and I do my best to respond to as many of them as I can, so you may as well say something. Anyway, until next time, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.